The following program was financed by a grant from America 250 PA.
Leechburg is located 35 miles northeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in southern Armstrong County on the banks of the Kiskiminetas River. Unofficially, Leechburg is 200 years old. Officially, the borough was incorporated on March 22nd of 1850. Leechburg really at this point is home. It's a snapshot to me of what small town life in Pennsylvania really is like and what it should be like. Settlement really took off down in the lower Kiski Valley in the area of Leechburg around 1814. Leechburg is located in an area of what is known as the Conemaugh Salt. The Conemaugh Salt was first discovered about 1795, 27 miles northeast of here in present-day Saltsburg, Pennsylvania. The salt was discovered coming up from brine seeps up there, and they would then boil that off to collect the salt crystals to preserve food. This was in the days before refrigeration, so they really had no other way to keep food during the winter period. During the salt production era, Leechburg was basically farming. The slope of the hill here was gentle enough that they could farm this area. So it had been cleared for wheat production mostly, a little bit of cattle. The salt wells were primarily located to the east and west. They were drilling salt wells all the way down to about the mouth of the Allegheny. Leechburg had its first well drilled in 1814. And salt was critical for not only survival, but also for westward expansion. And in times of war, it was also very important. Prior to the War of 1812 and to the War of the Revolution in 1776, the United States got most of its salt from England. When the War of the Revolution broke out in the War of 1812, both times England cut the supply off. So to survive that war, and both wars really, new supplies were needed. And those supplies were found in this valley where the quality of the brine was sufficiently higher than most other places. The Conemaugh salt would produce roughly a bushel of salt from 35 to 36 gallons of water. Other salt-producing regions needed around 80 to 200 gallons. So the combination of the Freeport coal seam here and the density of the brine led to this becoming the third largest salt-producing region in the 19th century and led to the establishment of a number of towns, including Natrona, Pennsylvania, just downriver from here, and to the north, Salina and Saltsburg were very big producers in salt. During the salt-producing era, they were also in production of the Pennsylvania Canal. It was a state-run project, and David Leech was a contractor on that project in Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania, where he had a contract to build some bridge abutments. Now, they had determined a need for a feeder dam 5 miles up the Kiskiminetas River to supply water for the canal from basically Freeport, Pennsylvania to Pittsburgh. The route of the canal hadn't actually been determined at that time as to whether it would proceed north to Kittanning or east up the Kiski Valley. So the feeder dam location, David Leech had arrived here around 1826 to investigate that location and draft a bid for the project. Now, when he arrived here and saw the salt-producing industry and the activity going on and was able to get a lay of the land and looked at the location, he had determined that this would be a good location for a settlement. It would be on the canal, whether as the feeder canal or as the mainline canal, didn't really matter. And there was plenty of export to come from Leechburg. And the lay of the land was suitable to construct a town on. So David Leech drafted and submitted that bid and won that contract to build lock number 11 and dam number 1 of the Pennsylvania Mainline Canal. Simultaneously, he had approached the landowners in Leechburg, Joseph Hunter and Matthew Shields, and worked up an agreement to purchase about 357 acres from them on which he would construct a town. He had access to the dam's water supply, so he knew he could establish industry, and there was plenty of export to be had. Now, he had a partner with him when he got here, a fellow contractor named George Trucks, who also did work on the Pennsylvania Canal. Trucks, however, became impatient with the arrangement, and he demanded to see the article of agreement with him and Matthew Shields and Joseph Hunter and David Leech for the purchase, because Hunter wasn't able to produce the title in a timely manner. And rather than grant some more time, he chucked it into the wood stove in the cabin and walked out on the deal. So Leech finished the agreement himself. He paid $1,500 for the entirety of the 357 acres, and he began to lay out the town around the same time they were working on the construction of Dam Number 1 and Lock Number 11. The Pennsylvania Canal was the largest project the state of Pennsylvania undertook. And it really is responsible for the shaping of the entirety of the borough of Leechburg. Without it, I don't think the town exists. Now, Leech really did embrace the canal and the canal economy. He had made the decision that he was going to open his own line of boats for traffic on the canal rather than pursue civil engineering. And he was the first commercial line in operation on the Pennsylvania Canal in about 1829 when it opened for traffic from Blairsville to Pittsburgh. He was not the first boat on the canal. That boat had come from Apollo. While he was working on this line of transport that he was developing, he made these trips east and west along the canal route, and he recruited other forwarders, teamsters, steamship operators, and whatnot, to create what would become D. Leech & Co. That generated a single point of contact shipping industry. It was sort of the first of its kind. I can't say with certainty that it was the absolute first, but it was certainly the best example of one. And what they did was they had agents in anywhere from Boston all the way down to Louisiana. And you could simply mark your destination of your package with D. Leech & Co. and the name of the city that you wanted to get it to. And D. Leech & Co.'s agents would pick it up and transport it to the next shipper along the line, and to the next, and to the next. And the Pennsylvania Canal served as the main trunk line of the entire network, but there were numerous forwarders of all types along the entirety of the scheme. And each one of them would get a cut of that profit as they moved that freight, having been partnered with each other. So David Leech on the Pennsylvania Canal, he had traveled the canal and acquired land to construct his own warehouses and boat yards and even rail car yards on the Allegheny Portage, so that he would have access to his equipment at his dime and his control to get these things moved. So it ended up being the largest. It was the preferred way to get immigrants from Ellis Island was D. Leech & Co. to Pittsburgh and west to St. Louis as the westward expansion pushed on. David Leech centered the towns around the canal. It was not unlike today when a town or an establishment of shopping center pops up around a highway. The main center of the business district was adjacent to the canal. Supporting businesses were located the next block down on Market Street. And the industry that would be powered by the dam's water was located right downstream from the dam. They all had their little districts, and then residences and churches got pushed out a little bit further. David Leech's first endeavor, the first thing he constructs in the town, of course, is a supply store. That store is there to supply not only his contract workers, but the residents he's trying to attract. He also established very early on a school in 1828, 6 years ahead of the Free School Act of Pennsylvania of 1834. So education was important to attract settlers to his town. He was responsible for the construction of the post office, at which he was appointed first postmaster. That role I think he had until 1850 when he was first elected mayor. He could not serve both posts at the same time legally. He constructed 4 brick homes and a number of other canal supporting establishments. With the advent of the railroad, and especially the chartering of the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1846, the canal was pretty much doomed. They knew that. David Leach knew that. The state of Pennsylvania knew that. It had yet to turn a profit even before the railroads had emerged. So as the canal waned and the railroad became more and more technologically sufficient, the state tried several times to dispose of it. The only bidder for the Pennsylvania Canal was the Pennsylvania Railroad. They paid a sum of $7.5 million in 1857 for the entirety of the canal. And the agreement reached was that the canal must be left to operate until the railroad was poised to take it over. Now, in Leechburg, that era lasted longer than anywhere else. And that's owing to the fact that the Pennsylvania Railroad's main line from Philadelphia to Harrisburg shadowed the original Pennsylvania Canal Railroad. So it was like-for-like replacement. But once you got past Altoona and into Hollidaysburg, there was a separation of routes, and they separated at Torrance, Pennsylvania, outside of Blairsville. And the canal went through the Kiski-Conemaugh Valley, and the railroad went overland towards Pittsburgh, a different direction. And because of that, they could not close the western division of the canal until the railroad was built from Blairsville to Pittsburgh. Now, to accomplish that was quite a feat because they had to build that from scratch, whereas in the rest of the network, they had infrastructure already in place. Now, at the same time, the Pennsylvania Railroad had been withholding payment of what the state called the tonnage tax. And the tonnage tax was a tax applied to canal freight boats to raise funds for the repair of the canal because there was damage caused by heavy freight boats as they came through. So the Pennsylvania Railroad argued that since that tax isn't going to repair their railroad, why should they pay it? And they had a good case. They did not pay any of the tax while the matter was heard in the courts. And by the time a decision was reached that the tax did not need to be applied to the railroad, they had amassed $850,000 in back taxes. Now, since the tax had applied legally in the period before the court's decision, they did still owe the $850,000. But the state gave them the option that they would commute that tax if the railroad would invest that sum into failed railroad charters. So that was a win for the Pennsylvania Railroad because the Northwest Charter would give them the ability to close the western division of the canal and invest in themselves. They opened the Western Pennsylvania Railroad through the Kiski-Conemaugh Valley in the spring of 1866. They had constructed it on the opposite bank of the canal and brought it all the way down to Freeport. And in the winter between 65 and 66, when the canal would have normally been closed, they had backfilled it and put the railroad grade on top of it and completed that project. That marked the final end of the mainline canal in Pennsylvania. The end of the Civil War coincided with the closing of the canal and brought about the Second Industrial Revolution. So as men were returning home from service and factories were ramping up and production was increasing, many of those gentlemen had been looking for work opportunities, and that's when the coal barons began to arrive here to look into the Freeport coal. And the first one that arrives here was a gentleman by the name of Joseph Grant Beale. After the war, Joseph Grant Beale became very active in the coal fields in Squirrel Hill outside of Pittsburgh. And he had opened 2 mines there and was doing fairly well as a collier down there. And he made the decision to come to Leechburg when he sold those 2 mines in 1868. He used the proceeds from the sale of his mines in Squirrel Hill to buy the undeveloped lands of Leechburg from David Leach's son, Addison Leach, who was still in the area at the time. So he put the lands up for sale, and that's what brought Joseph Grant Beale here. Beale bought the undeveloped lands and began to amass coal fields outside of town as much as he could along the Pennsylvania Railroad. And he opened his first mine, I believe 1868 or 69, and began extraction there. Joseph Grant Beale really wanted to find himself a customer that would make use of his coal more locally, where it would be more lucrative for him to extract it and transport it at shorter distances. So in around 1870, Joseph Grant Beale convinced an ironmaster by the name of William Rogers, who had been working in Apollo at the time, to locate his new tin mill here in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. William Rogers was an ironmaster from Wales, and he had grown up in the tin industry there before moving to Pittsburgh in the 1850s. And it was his ambition to bring tin plate to America. Joseph Grant Beale secured the lots for him and the coal supply, and by 1872, the Siberian Iron Works went into production here in Leechburg, PA, one of the earliest, if not the earliest, tin plate manufacturer in the country. With the coming of the Siberian Iron Works to Leechburg, the steel industry actually became more of an economic driver and a contributor to the state and country than the coal resources did here. The Siberian Iron Works, of course, with its innovations in natural gas and its early production of tin plate, did help with the establishment of a number of other tin mills, and after the McKinley Tariff Act of 1890 was part of the reason why the entirety of tin plate production was transferred from Wales to America within the course of 3 to 4 years. But more so, what was learned at the rolling mills of the Siberian Iron Works really led to the founding of a number of other industries in the valley, one to include the Hyde Park Foundry, which specialized in making tin mills, and the other was the Leechburg Foundry, which did the same. The Leechburg Foundry was founded by former Siberian Iron Works employee George Mesta, and George Mesta eventually grew that into the Mesta Machine Company in Homestead, PA. It was one of the largest foundries in the world at over a mile long, and it occupied at least 30 acres. It gave employment to somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 people and persisted until around 1983. The Mesta Machine Company was highly innovative and very crucial to the winning of World War II. At the same time, coal baron Alfred Hicks, after departing Leechburg, founded a steel company in Brackenridge called Allegheny Steel. And while he was doing that, there were gentlemen up here who would come from the Siberian Iron Works and from mills in Katanning, and they founded what was called the West Leechburg Steel Company. And the West Leechburg Steel Company was right across the river from Leechburg, and they were all involved heavily in specialty metals. Allegheny Steel and West Leechburg Steel Company eventually merged during the Great Depression to form Allegheny Ludlam Steel. So Allegheny Ludlam Steel still produces specialty metals to this day, and they had 2 mills here in Leechburg, Pennsylvania, where specialty metals were produced. One was at the West Leechburg plant that had been founded in the 1890s, and the other one was at the Baghdad plant, a little bit further down the river, that made silicon strip steel for electrical purposes. Now, both of those mills persisted long after the industry's decline in Pittsburgh. The West Leechburg plant closed in 2006, followed by the shuttering of the Baghdad plant in 2016. But there were a lot of innovations in the steel industry that had come out of this area. One of the industries that was founded here during the steel era that wasn't directly tied to industry at all would be the Schenley Distillery. The Schenley Distillery was located just about 5 miles down the river from Leechburg, Pennsylvania, and it was founded around the turn of the century when a chemist by the name of Frank Sinclair had come through and taken a water sample from an underground spring in the area, finding that the pH and calcium contents were perfect for distillation of spirits. Sinclair had acquired the land from Mary Schenley of Pittsburgh, and he did name his distillery after Mary Schenley. Well, she was a well-known philanthropist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So the distillery took Mary's name and was established mostly for the distillation of whiskey in the beginning. It changed hands a few times. It came up against Prohibition. During the Prohibition era, Sinclair sold out, and another buyer came in, and they used it as a concentration warehouse, because during Prohibition you could get whiskey by prescription. So they weren't allowed to distill, but they were allowed to mix. So they maintained a concentrate and mixed it per prescription, much like any pharmacy does today. Owing to the contents of the distillery, it was kept under police and guard dog protection during Prohibition. But having been able to do that, they survived Prohibition quite well. And after the end of Prohibition, they were quick to expand the facility to over 60 acres. And I think they had 67 aging houses and other associated buildings. And they employed, in the 1950s and 60s, upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 people. They really did get large. The problem for the distillery was the changing taste of the American consumer. And in the 1970s, drinkers started to migrate towards beer. And Schenley was not a brewery, they were a distillery. And that slowly eroded them, as did mechanization. And coupled with the decline in sales, the size of the plant that they had built could not survive beyond 1983. And in November of 1983, they capped their last bottle. But during their run, they had employed thousands and thousands of local residents. It was a good job for, young people out of school would take that job, and quite often housewives worked there after the war. And now during World War II, I believe that Schenley switched over to making industrial grade alcohol to support the war effort. I think, if I'm correct, they had turned out somewhere around 33.5 million gallons of industrial grade alcohol that was shipped off to the military in support of the war. The Leechburg Area Museum and Historical Society is located in the David F. Leach House in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. This was one of the homes that was built by David Leach. It was given to his son, David F. Leach, in 1849 as a wedding present when he married Rebecca McElhaney. Now, unfortunately, David F. Leach passed away just a year later, and the house was then deeded over to the widow. The Leechburg Area Museum and Historical Society was founded in 1976 as a bicentennial project. When they organized on March 22nd of 1976 to coincide with the official incorporation date of the borough, they did not have a home. One thing that they wanted to have was a museum where they could display artifacts of Leechburg's past. And they found that in a small apartment building that had been constructed on the same grounds as the David F. Leach House in around 1915. Now, at the time, the David F. Leach House was a dentist's office. It had been acquired in 1973 by dentist Dr. Courtney Bischoff, who did extensive renovations to stabilize the building and improve it, mechanicals, roofing, wiring, everything. He invested the sum of $90,000 over a three-phase plan to get the building stable. Mr. Bischoff did care very much about Leechburg's history, as well as his dental practice. So when they were looking for their home, Dr. Bischoff offered them the small apartment building on the grounds, free of charge, for them to carry on their mission of preserving Leechburg's history and telling Leechburg's stories. Now, when Dr. Bischoff retired a few years later, he passed the practice to his son, Dr. Courtney Bischoff Jr., and he carried out the practice until about 1990, when it was time for him to retire. And upon his retirement, he was generous enough to sell the building to the Leechburg Area Museum and Historical Society for the sum of $50,000, which was well below what they had invested in it during the course of their dental practice. They moved into here in 1991 and have continued to expand and improve the grounds since that time. From the outside, the Leechburg Museum still retains much of its original look. It's an 1830s, somewhat federal-style building, but not entirely. It is well-maintained, but nondescript. The display areas are all kept on the inside. When you come through the front doors of the Leechburg Area Museum, The first thing you're going to see is our industry room, where we highlight our steel and coal heritage. Shenley Industries is highlighted there, one of the biggest industries in our town over the years. And then as you come through, we have displays set up for the canal and for David Leach and for David Leach's shipping company, D. Leach & Co. After that, the history gets a little less industrial, and we have rooms devoted to our Market Street businesses. Leechburg has always been sort of a mom and pop run town. We don't have many chains here. Everything is locally owned, something we're very proud of. And we also have rooms dedicated to our fraternal organizations, our churches, our high school alumni, and high school sports are accounted for. We have displays set up for transportation, natural disasters. Our military veterans are honored with a room of their own, as long as our police, fire, and other civil services that we've had here in the town over the years. I can't really put my finger on one thing that would be my favorite thing about the history of Leechburg. History is entangled. It's hard to learn about one thing without learning about everything that surrounded it at the time of its occurrence. I think my favorite thing is there is such a good mix here of industrial and transportation and cultural history, as well as the continued redevelopment of the area, over the years as the periods change. I think that it is incredibly important to preserve an area's history. Without that link to the past, your cultural identity suffers. I do think that, if anything, the preservation of our history connects generations with their ancestors and gives them the cultural identity of their own that is reflected in the things that built the town. It's hard for people to care about anything if they don't understand its origins. Once you learn why things are the way they are, and that your ancestors had a hand in that, their importance, grows, and the preservation of them becomes more important to the people.